battle droids tripping over themselves, leaders who cackle like they are auditioning for a soap opera, and Count Dooku waving his cape around like Dracula on vacation. It all feels so obvious, like the movies are begging you to boo them. But here is the twist. What if they were never actually the bad guys at all? The Republic loved to sell itself as noble, fair, and democratic. But come on, we all saw how it really worked. Senators bribed by corporations, endless debates that solved nothing, and Jedi acting more like generals than monks. It is like rooting for a government made of every office meeting you ever hated, except now they have laser swords and armies to back it up. And the Separatists, instead of being evil masterminds, were just saying, enough is enough. Think about it. If you lived on some outer rim world getting taxed into the ground, while Coruscant sat around sipping blue milk martinis, would you not want out too? The Separatists said no more, and for that they were branded as traitors. That is like quitting a job, because your boss is terrible, and then being called the villain for not wanting to be exploited anymore. It is almost funny how easily the Republic spun the story, except it is not funny at all. And the Jedi, oh man, the Jedi, peacekeepers of the galaxy, defenders of balance, and suddenly they are knee-deep in war crimes before anyone even finishes their morning caf. They went from wisdom and meditation to shouting battle commands like they were cosplaying generals at a convention. If irony had a hall of fame, this would be on display right at the front. It is wild how quickly they abandoned their own philosophy to play soldiers for politicians. The crazy part is that the Separatists had legitimate points. They knew the Republic was rotting, they saw the corruption, they felt the neglect, and they were right. Sure, their movement got hijacked by Sith Lords and shady corporations, but at its core, it was about independence and survival. And the Republic calling them villains while slowly transforming into an empire is peak hypocrisy. It is like accusing someone of stealing while you are busy emptying the entire safe. In this video, we are going to dive into why the Separatists were never truly the villains, how the Republic was already corrupt beyond repair, and why that twist completely changes how you see the Clone Wars. We will break down their cause, the hypocrisy of the Jedi, and the manipulation that turned the galaxy upside down. When you first watch the prequels, the Separatists look like the obvious villains. Droids marching in endless columns, Count Dooku giving ominous speeches, General Grievous twirling lightsabers like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. But if you scratch the surface, the story is not that simple. What if the Separatists were not evil masterminds, but frustrated systems fed up with a broken republic? Think about the Republic for a moment. Corruption was rampant, senators were bribed by corporations, and democracy was more performance than practice. If you were a planet on the outer rim, constantly overtaxed and underrepresented, wouldn't you want out? The Separatists claimed independence because the system was not working for them. That sounds less like treason and more like survival. It is curious how the films frame this. Every Separatist is painted with the same brush, like they were all power-hungry or greedy. Yet many member worlds simply wanted autonomy. They were tired of being treated like pawns in Coruscant's endless debates. Entire star systems signed on, because the alternative was being ignored until it was too late. Even Count Dooku's speeches hit differently when you really listen. He calls out the corruption of the Senate and the manipulation of the Jedi, and he is not wrong. Sure, he is still a Sith Lord pulling strings, but that does not erase the truth at the core of his words. The Separatists had legitimate grievances, even if their leadership twisted them for darker goals. That is the fascinating thing about the Separatists. Beneath the droids and villains, there was a coalition of worlds that simply wanted to break free from a rotting republic. And when you look at it that way, suddenly the moral lines blur in ways Star Wars rarely admits. What makes this so infuriating is how the Republic never owned up to its failures. Instead of addressing corruption or reforming the Senate, they slapped the label of traitor on entire star systems. Imagine living under constant exploitation, finally saying enough is enough, and being told you are evil for wanting change. That level of hypocrisy is maddening. Take the Jedi, for example. They were supposed to be peacekeepers, mediators, defenders of balance. But when the Separatists rose up, the Jedi stopped negotiating and started commanding troops. Instead of asking why thousands of planets wanted out, they marched clone armies to crush them. It is frustrating because the Jedi became tools of the Republic's politics rather than guardians of justice. Then there is the Senate itself. Leaders like Padme and Bail Organa tried to push for diplomacy, but they were drowned out by bureaucrats who benefited from war. Figures like Masa Meda cheered as the war machine rolled on, while corporate powers like the banking clan made fortunes on both sides. It is the classic example of powerful people thriving, while ordinary citizens suffered. The Separatists had every right to be angry. When you are taxed without representation, when your people starve, while senators on Coruscant sip wine, rebellion stops being a choice and starts becoming inevitable. But the Republic never admitted that, instead painting the Separatists as villains to justify their own militarization. That kind of spin is enough to make anyone furious. The frustration comes from knowing that the entire war could have been avoided if the Republic had listened. But instead they dug in, they armed up, and they used the clones as blunt instruments to silence dissent. And that is not justice, that is authoritarianism in disguise. The real heartbreak is that so many Separatist citizens were not villains at all. They were ordinary people who just wanted a better life for their families, and instead they were caught in a war they did not control. The leadership was corrupt, yes, but the citizens, the soldiers, and even the droids were pawns in someone else's game. Their story is not one of evil, but of being trapped in a tragedy too big to escape. Look at planets like Raxus, the capital of the Confederacy. It was filled with senators who genuinely wanted peace, who voted for independence because they believed it was the only way forward. They were silenced, manipulated, and eventually destroyed when the war ended. Their hopes were real, but their fate was sealed from the start. That is devastating to think about. Even the droids, played for comedy in the films, represent this sorrow. They were mass-produced to fight battles they never chose, deactivated and scrapped once the war ended. They were designed to be disposable, and in that way, they mirror the clones. Two entire armies created for a war that was never theirs to begin with. That is the tragedy behind the humour. And then there were Separatist leaders who tried to do the right thing. Mina Bonteri, a senator who pushed for peace talks, believed diplomacy could save lives. She was assassinated before she could achieve real change. Her death symbolises the sorrow of the Separatists. Their best voices silenced while the war machine consumed everything around them. The sorrow of the Separatists lies in knowing their cause was not inherently evil. It was hijacked, twisted, and weaponized, leaving good people branded as villains and crushed under the Republic's iron heel. For all the tragedy, you cannot help but be in awe of how vast and complex the Separatist movement really was. It was not just droids and warlords, it was entire cultures staking their futures on a risky gamble. That level of scale is breathtaking when you stop to consider it. The galaxy split in two, millions of systems standing against an institution that had dominated for centuries. The Separatists had ingenuity on their side. Their fleets were massive, their technology advanced, and their strategies often brilliant. The malevolent superweapon nearly crippled the Republic Navy, and General Grievous orchestrated campaigns that forced the Jedi to the brink. For all their flaws, the Separatists fought with a level of daring that made them a genuine threat. And their leaders, even the darker ones, had presence. Count Dooku was not just a Sith Lord, he was a fallen Jedi with charisma and conviction. Grievous, while cowardly at times, represented the terrifying future of war as machines replaced men. Even corporate titans like Newt Gunray embodied the dangerous marriage of politics and greed. These figures made the Separatists formidable in ways the Republic struggled to match. What inspires awe most, though, is the courage of everyday systems who joined. They knew they would be branded traitors, that the Republic would unleash Jedi and clones against them, and yet they chose independence anyway. That level of resolve speaks volumes about how broken the Republic had become. You do not risk everything unless the alternative feels unbearable. Despite the chaos, the Separatists represent hope in an odd way. Their movement was proof that people could still rise up against corruption, that even the most entrenched system could be challenged. Yes, their cause was twisted by Sith manipulation, but the spark of independence was genuine. And that spark is something worth holding on to. Think about the citizens who dreamed of a better future, families on distant worlds who wanted fair representation, merchants who wanted freedom from unfair taxes, senators like Mina Bonteri who believed in peace. Their dreams did not die with the Confederacy. They lived on in the rebellion, in the idea that tyranny can and should be resisted. That hope was carried forward. Even in the aftermath of defeat, the Separatists' ideals survived. The empire rose from the ashes of the Republic, proving everything the Separatists had warned about. And yet people remembered. They resisted. They fought back. The sparks of hope that fueled the Confederacy became the fire that powered the alliance to restore the Republic. That continuity matters. Hope also comes from the clarity the Separatists bring to the story. They remind us that Star Wars is not just about light versus dark, but about systems, politics, and the human desire for freedom. They show us that questioning authority is not weakness, it is strength. That idea, more than anything, keeps the story alive for future generations. The Separatists may have fallen, but the hope they carried endures, because every rebellion, every uprising, every fight against tyranny in Star Wars owes something to their struggle. And that makes their story more meaningful than the films ever let on. In the end, the tragedy of the Separatists is that their movement was doomed before it began. They had the numbers, the resolve, and the moral high ground in many ways, but their leadership was infiltrated by Sith Lords who turned them into pawns. From the start, their cause was manipulated to serve Palpatine's grand design. That is the cruelest irony of all. The resolution lies in understanding that the Separatists were not villains. They were victims of a rigged game, a galactic conflict engineered to destroy both sides and consolidate power in the hands of one man. Their war was never about freedom versus tyranny. It was about Sith control disguised as political struggle. That is the sobering truth. The Republic labelled them traitors, but the Republic itself was already compromised. Democracy had rotted, the Senate was broken, and the Jedi had lost their way. The Separatists simply pulled back the curtain too early, exposing flaws the galaxy was not ready to confront. And for that, they paid the ultimate price. The tragedy is that history remembers them as villains. Children watching the movies see droids and monsters, not desperate worlds fighting for survival. The nuance of their struggle is buried under propaganda, just as Palpatine intended. Their defeat was not just military, it was narrative. They were erased from the story of righteousness.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.